Welcome in, folks. It's Keith Billick here with another episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. This is going to be a remixed episode featuring an interview from about 5 years ago, but I'm doing this for several reasons. First of all, on the last episode with Johnny Beyer, he talked all about how inspirational Jens Kruger was to him, and it occurred to me that a lot of you who maybe have not been listening to this podcast since the very beginning may have missed one of my favorite episodes, so I really wanted you folks to get a chance to hear it, and also for any of you who have heard it. Like I said, this is remixed, so it's I have improved the audio quality, added some new sound samples, and who among us wouldn't benefit from another round of hearing Jens Kruger talk about music? But before we get to that, I do have to thank the VIP Patreon supporter of the show. As always, if you like what you're hearing, please go to patreon.com/banjopodcast. And this episode's special VIP supporter is Paul Healy. Paul takes lessons from Chris Cool, who was featured a few episodes back and has very generously supported the show. So, Paul, thank you so much for your generous support. And once again, patreon.com/banjopodcast to get all the information about how to become a VIP supporter yourself. It's only a few dollars per month. Another reason I'm doing one of these remix episodes is I've been busy. I've been on the road with my band Wilson Thicket quite a bit, playing some good gigs, and we have some more of those coming up in the near future. I am preparing to teach at 2 different banjo camps coming up over the next month and a half or so. The first one is Great Lakes Music Camp. You may have heard me talk about that before. Go check out greatlakesmusic.org. That is a camp for all the acoustic bluegrass-related instruments, as well as songwriting and some other things too. It's a fantastic weekend on the shores of Lake Michigan. That's October 3rd through 6th. So once again, greatlakesmusic.org. And then the next one will be my first year teaching at the Ashokan Banjo Weekend. That's at the Ashokan Center in upstate New York, November 15th through 17th. I will be joining some of my banjo heroes, such as Hillary Hawk, Maggie Shar, B.B. Bowness, and Scott Hopkins. Head over to ashokancenter.org for more information and to enroll in that one. I hope to see some of you folks at both of those camps. As always, you can contact me with any questions, comments, or concerns about the show. That's pickyfingersbanjopodcast at gmail.com. Today's episode features Jens Kruger. This interview was originally aired back in May of 2019, but as I mentioned before, Jens is a universal favorite among banjo players. He's the longtime banjoist with the Kruger Brothers band, and anybody who has ever seen a live Kruger Brothers performance knows how exciting and inspirational and sophisticated Jens's playing and composing is. And for as inspiring as it is to hear him play the banjo, it's equally inspiring to hear him talk about banjo and music in general. So whether you are listening to this interview for a second, third, fourth, or fifth time, or just hearing it for the first time, I hope you really enjoy this updated remixed episode featuring Jens Kruger.
Banjo, I heard it on the radio, and of course at home we had Dixieland. Our father had some Dixieland recordings, and I liked the sound of the banjo. And then
but mostly plectrum banjo would be on those, right?
Yes, but I also heard, bluegrass style banjo, on the radio. I was born in 1962. There was still radio, American Network, Forces Network that came out of Germany. And that would be, for the soldiers, and it would be, it had a lot of, rock music at the time, of course. And they had their bluegrass shows, so Bill Monroe as the Flat Earl Scruggs was on, in the 60s.
Opry shows?
Not opry shows, just albums they played, for the soldiers, That was
really cool.
So I was exposed, to Molly and Tim Brooks and Foggy Mountain Breakdown and Beverly Hillbillies, but all the things, but I didn't know the names of all the tunes and the things. It was just the sound that was there. Mm-hmm. And I just loved the banjo sound. And of course, we had contact with a man who was a folkie from New York. He was an American who was a GI and got stuck in Europe.
Like a friend of your family?
He was actually the dad of a boy who went to kindergarten with my mom, was a kindergarten teacher. And so he knew that we played banjo, and I was 10 years old at the time. And he took interest. He said, "Wow, these kids playing banjo love American folk music." And so he was a folkie, and he, of course, he saw Pete Seeger, and he was one of these guys his name was John B. McCarthy, and he was one of these guys who was at Washington Square, singing. At the time, and. He loved folk music. He loved Woody Guthrie. He loved Led Belly and Pete Seeger, of course. And he introduced me really to the sound of Pete Seeger, of the banjo, of that kind of claw hammer and style. And I was fascinated by it. And of course, then it was a mixture in Europe. I didn't see banjo players. I just heard them on radio.
Was that the first thing you tried to do, was a Seeger style?
Well, I didn't know that there was a 5-string or a tenor banjo. It was just banjo when I was a kid, So I had a tenor banjo, and I thought I had to master tenor banjo before it would start to sound like bluegrass.
Were you playing with a pick or
the plectrum? Yeah, I was playing with the plectrum and just strumming the banjo and trying to learn Dixieland solos, which I did, and so I became a freelance musician when I was 12 years old, playing for Dixieland bands,
Oh, wow.
So I played lots of Dixieland with actually fairly good people, so, and I became sort of the sub-banjo player for Switzerland for everybody.
That's amazing.
And so I started working for the radio orchestra when I was in 5th grade. Whenever they needed recording of tenor banjos, they would ask me. So
and you still weren't sure about what the distinction was at that point, or by then you knew?
I started to realize, that there was a style that was played with finger picks, and but I was just playing every day and didn't think too much about it. And then I didn't have a 5-string banjo, so I had another tenor banjo, and I put a screw in it and started to retune it, and did another, because it's a different tuning.
Yeah.
And my brother, a school friend of mine, he was on a vacation in America, and he brought back a 5-string banjo that he purchased, on a farmer's market for $50 or something.
Oh, yeah.
And so they had it at home hanging on the wall, and he brought it to a show.
They weren't even playing it?
No, it didn't have strings on it, no bridge, nothing, it didn't have 5th-string playing. And Uwe saw it, and he said, "Well, how much you want for it?" And I can't remember. And Uwe just took the money out of his pocket and gave it to him. And that was my first 5-string banjo. And
Uwe brought it right to you?
He was standing with me while I was looking at it, and so he just sort of gave me that. And then I ordered a 5th-string peg and set of 5-string banjo strings and a bridge, and so I just set the banjo up and bought some finger picks, and then I had a little transition area between the 5-string playing and the tenor.
Yeah, still getting jobs doing the radio orchestra.
Yeah, I was doing all kinds of things, and being a sub for Dixieland, but I started trying to figure out, old Joe Clark and, Cumberland Gap and all these things, trying to figure out how they do the role. And of course, there was no instruction.
Yeah, how did you figure it out? Just by listening over and over?
Just by listening it over and over, yes. It's like old Joe Clark, that's how Eric Weisberg would maybe play it. But I was learning it, from Bill Emerson.
From his recording, you mean?
Yeah, Bill Emerson, and he had an interesting way of doing it. Instead of going, he would go. And I thought that was really cool, you know.
Just the slightly different roll pattern.
The nice thing about that is that you cannot just move it up the neck and play it octave higher. Like that,
right,
you know. So, but I just tried to pick it up as good as I could. I'm sure I made a lot of mistakes, and I didn't really know that you would, lead more with the thumb. And I just, slowly but surely, figured it out how it was done. And then we became street musicians, brother and I,
Just the two of you?
Yeah, there was no more home. So it was 40 years ago this year. There was no more home, and we just left. And Uwe and me, I was 17, and I started working on the streets, playing. And it was enough money to get food. And we stayed sometimes with people, or went to very cheap hotels, or went to homeless shelters, or...
Where were you doing this?
All over Europe, So we started in Zurich, and then we went to Munich, Amsterdam, Berlin, Paris, everywhere. And we lived on trains. We bought Eurail tickets,
sure,
where you could stay for a month or two, and use all the trains you wanted to.
Yeah, unlimited within that time period.
Yes, right, yeah. And so we would, maybe, let's say, play all day in Munich, and make enough money, to eat and be, and then take the latest train out of Munich, and then go to Copenhagen, for instance, and then play all day in Copenhagen, and then take the latest train out to Paris.
You were on tour already, yeah.
So we're taking a train every night as far as we possibly could, the latest train out.
Just a new city every time.
So we could sleep on the train.
Yeah.
See, so the train became our hotel.
Yeah.
So we would sleep on the train. In the morning, we would get out and take the showers, at the railway station. So
I didn't realize they had those.
They always had showers at the railway station,
okay.
So you had to pay, put money in, or prepay, and then you can take a shower. And that's what we would do, and then go out and play and go eat breakfast and play all day and
make some more money. Yeah,
and play all night. If we're lucky and don't get arrested by the police.
Was that something that was frowned upon by a lot of police?
Well, yeah, sometimes, police would just arrest you and check you out, if you were not some criminal, or take you away from the streets, or... Because, you see, playing street music is a gray zone because you don't pay taxes, right? You make money and a living, but you're completely away from society.
Right.
So we did that for 2 years.
What would you say you learned as a musician from doing that for the 2 years?
I think a lot, really a lot. First of all, I learned about society a lot. When you're at the bottom of society, so to speak, I didn't have a home, I didn't have a house or a parent's house I could go to.
Yeah.
You literally, like a bird, you just roam around. And of course, I wasn't alone. I was with Uwe. And on the streets, there were a lot of other people who lived on the streets, who played music or, did whatever to survive.
Yeah.
And you become really close friends to these people, and you start to know that there's this big scene, sort of like an underground scene of people who live on the streets. And it was in the 70s, of course, and there was Americans who got stranded in Europe because they'd been to the Vietnam War, could never find back into society, and just became musicians and just traveled the world. And we met up with them, and through them we learned lots of songs of Doc Watson and Gordon Lightfoot. And, a lot of people had strong influence on us, and it was not about a career. You see, the music scene on the street was just, you survive and you do what you love. And you try to, and friendship was very much valued because there was your society. Everybody looked down on you because you're standing on the street, you're worth nothing. Today, there's a little bit of different sentiment. I can see that people value street music in a different way today. In those days, it was really different. But I
thought you were a bum, basically.
Well, you were really outside of the society. And even, when you were a musician in Europe at the time, that people just thought, well, music isn't a real profession, And of course, I wasn't sure if it was either, because I was barely making a living.
But you knew that you liked doing it.
The advantage was that I was literally playing all day.
Yeah.
So I was literally playing from morning till night. When we were at home, I could play a lot. but not as much because we had to work a lot at home because we had, a butcher store and a restaurant, and there was lots to do, and I had hard work, get up early in the morning. We had horses, and, I'd take care of everything. And so, but when I was on the streets and there was no more home, and I could play every day, 10, 12, 14 hours if I wanted to. And
right.
You're young, you have energy, you play. And I think playing that much and playing loud all the time, because, you cannot play introverted.
Yes, right.
So I was never an extroverted person, that would dance around or do big mimics or things. I just stand there and play as loud as I can, as interesting as I can, so people can
hope that people notice, and
so people can stand, or just throw something in the case. And I think that really helped me understand that the directness of what you do and the effect on people, and how they react to you in positive and negative ways. Yeah.
You think you still use a lot of those skills even with your performances today? It's
interesting that, I talked to Doc Watson. Doc Watson became really a good friend, and I'm very thankful for that, for the years that we knew him. And we played a lot of shows together and spent a lot of time together. And he was also, for years, he was a street musician.
Oh, okay.
Playing in Boone, getting his guitar out. And it was fascinating how much we bonded just to that fact. That we knew that music needed to be played in our situation. It needed to be played stern, not vague.
Yeah.
There was no place for being vague.
Yeah.
Vague on the street.
Right.
You had to be, and that's what you hear in Doc Watson's playing. It's not a question, do I want to play this or do I want to play this? No, I want to play this,
Just decisive.
There's a certainty of what you wanted to play and not looking for it. And I realized that if the more stern I am with what I wanted to play, the more money I could make, or the more people would actually be attracted to it in a certain way.
You noticed the difference when you would have a certain
difference.
Attitude.
Yes, if I would, play, if I would play. That's lounge music, and it has not. This doesn't have the energy, to make people stop.
Yeah.
Of course, there's people who are interested in that, but not enough, for me to survive.
Not when you're walking by on a sidewalk.
No, it was what Earl Scruggs would have done. It was, play loud, and really, show you're here.
Was that what was most successful for you in those days? Was Earl Scruggs type of music? Or?
Well, yes, and of course, I got exposed to great influence like John Hickman. He played things, he played these licks. That I really thought, wow, I never heard anybody do this.
Yeah.
Or this kind of thing. He had, so rhythmic things that are really attracted me, and I thought, wow, that's really. And he was so smooth, and he had such worked out, So he had great versions that had lots of sort of bounce and drive. So he was a big influence. And of course, Bela Fleck. I heard him, when he started playing with Spectrum, and there was a few things that I heard, on the streets. And I thought he was also at the same time as, as we were playing in the streets on Copenhagen, Bela Fleck played a concert, there.
Oh, he did?
Of course, but I could never see him because,
with
we didn't.
Spectrum?
I can't remember with what band he was. I think it might have been Spectrum. I don't know. It was 1980.
Yeah.
So, but he was. Everybody knew he's this great, new banjo player.
Yeah.
And but I never got to see him, of course.
No.
Because I didn't have the money to go see the show or anything. But I would have loved to. And of course, Bill Keith, was very big because he was in Europe, and he played, Alan Mundy at the time.
So a lot of melodic players, it sounds like, is what you were trying to...
And I loved the melodic style, additional to the Scruggs style, and I sort of had a wild mixture of it,
Yeah.
And then, CBS Records saw us play on the streets. So we teamed up with two New Yorkers, mandolin and bass, and they saw us play, and they gave us a record contract and a manager, and so we started touring. And
Still in Europe, or they wanted you to go overseas?
I was in Europe. So we started playing everywhere around Europe.
And were you called the Kruger Brothers already?
No, it was called Rocky Road.
Okay.
Because it was a suiting name for us being street musicians, former street musicians. And so it was called Rocky Road. And it was very good for us, actually, at the time. But then my brother decided to go more country because there was more money in country.
Yeah.
And he played guitar and sang. So he said, well, I want to play electric guitar.
There still is, I think.
So... And I thought, well, I'm going to stay with bluegrass. And I saved up money. I worked for the railroads for half a year and cleaned train wagons. And so we went, my wife and me, she was my fiancée at the time.
Yeah.
We went to America and bought a Plymouth Duster in New York and drove out to Bean Blossom. I met Bill Monroe and I started playing shows with Bill Monroe.
That was the first thing you did when I
came to America. So I started playing with Bill Monroe on a regular bass almost.
Oh, that's incredible.
So he enjoyed, I don't know what he enjoyed about my playing, but there was a mystery when I met Bill Monroe.
A mystery about what? About him?
Well, it was. When I saw him play, I was really taken by his performance because I've seen a lot of great musicians in my life before, but I've never seen actual visionaries. Mm-hmm. There's a difference. Visionaries don't necessarily need to be the greatest musicians, let's say, but they have something that they bring to this world.
Yeah.
Right? There's people who can reproduce anything there is, but then there's people who bring something of their own that's very strong.
Right.
A strong vision.
And you consider Bill Monroe to be one of those people?
Yeah, you could instantly tell that there was a different page. It was not somebody who just copied or could play anything anybody else could play.
Yeah.
He couldn't play like Jethro Burns, or he couldn't play and he didn't care. Yeah. Because he did his thing, and he did it so convincing because he believed so strongly in his vision of what he wanted his music to sound like, or what his presence and then playing with him, really, I realized that you stand beside him and you feel completely safe. There wasn't a weird feeling of maybe, am I good enough, or am I going to do this right? He gave me so much confidence. I felt completely safe.
Interesting.
And it was and music just happened to be good when you play with him. And there was a magic because of his there was a vision sort of. It's hard to explain, but there's an inner urge to create something, a sound, a way of doing something. And it's not technical, or it's not describable in a harmonic sense. It's just an inner urge for something.
An attitude, maybe?
A dream.
Yeah.
Maybe. And that's, he was, and I was really taken by it. I was really fascinated. But the mystery was when I walked up to him after his show, when I first saw him play, and I walked up to him and said, Mr. Monroe, I just want to thank you for your music. Because, I love your music. I think it's marvelous, and I want to thank you for it. Uh-huh. And he just looked at me, and I didn't have my banjo with me. And he just looked at me, and he looked at me in the eye, and he just said to me, you know what? You're going to play with me tomorrow. And he turned around and walked away.
Not even knowing what instrument you play, or if you played anything.
Nothing.
Amazing.
And so I went back to my fiancée, to Krista, and I said, well, she said, oh, did you talk to Bill Monroe? I said, yes. And he said I should play with him tomorrow. And she said, yeah, sure.
So how were you feeling? Were you nervous about this? Or
well, I thought I probably misheard, Uh-huh. So next day I took my banjo to the stage in Bean Blossom, and I was sort of lingering around back there, sort of standing there with my banjo case right beside a tree somewhere. And Bill Monroe came in with this blue Cadillac that he had, Jimmy Martin gave that to him, I think, a big blue Cadillac. He came with his big blue Cadillac. And he got out of the car, and he saw me, and he waved me over and said, okay, I'm going to play a few songs, and I'm going to call you up. And so I obviously didn't mishear, and I have no idea until today how he knew that I play, and I have no idea. I have absolutely no clue, and that's what I said is a mystery.
That's incredible.
And so I played with him. People loved it, you know.
Do you remember which songs?
I played Train 45, Orange Blossom Special, you know. He wanted me to show off.
Yeah.
And he wanted, you know, and I did. Because I was on the streets, I could play really fast. I could play very crazy, you know. It was a little bit like maybe Carl Jackson, you know, recordings of the 73, you know, whatever, Blue Blossom, Orange Blossom.
Orange Blossom Special,
just crazy, you know, going full throttle. And I could play very clean and precise. I can say that today. You know, I was 19 and I was all cylinders running.
Yeah.
So
who was his normal banjo player?
Blake Williams.
Okay. And he was okay with you
he loved it. Blake Williams, but you know, is one of the finest people you could ever meet. He's first class, man. I think that's Bill Monroe. You know, he always told me how much he loved him and how much, you know, Blake Williams would take care of him and make sure he's got everything where he needed. And he was really taking care of Bill Monroe, Blake Williams. You know, he's
interesting,
a first-class person. And Wayne Lewis played guitar, Mark Embry played bass, and Kenny Baker played fiddle. And that's also when I played Grand Ole Opry then with Bill Monroe and stayed with him on the farm for 2 months.
Oh, that's so cool. So when did all the Kruger Brothers stuff start happening? When did Uwe come over and how did you?
Well, one thing, you know, was important.
Is that skipping too much?
No. I just want to add one thing to Bill Monroe's stay. Bill Monroe was the one who actually told me, he said, you know, we would sit in the kitchen at night and we'd play. You know, every midnight there was ice cream time. So he would have ice cream and we would sit in the kitchen and we'd eat ice cream and play. And then he would always ask me, you know, play me something. And I would play something and I would say, oh, that sounds like Don Reno. Or he would say, that sounds like Earl Scruggs. And then he said, do you write your own music? I said, yes. So he said, play me something. And I had written something, you know, small. And then he looked at me and said, do you like it? I said, no. And then he said, well, you see, Jens, he said, this is you, whether you like it or not. It's like when you look in the mirror, right?
Yeah.
Whether you like it or not, it's you, right? So, and all you got is you. So all you got is this. So you better start doing something with that. You know, because you cannot be Earl Scruggs, you cannot be Don Reno. And America is a place where you can do as a hobby, play something that other people played. Like, you know, you can be influenced by them. But in the end, you have to present yourself.
It sounds like that's probably the type of thinking that led him to have that attitude and dream that you were talking about earlier, where he had this vision of what he wanted and he was just very comfortable with it being him.
He developed, well, I don't know if anybody ever gets comfortable being himself, but you start to realize that there's no other way.
Yes.
You know, because in 1997, when we then came and were invited to play with, you know, at Merlefest with Uwe and Joel, you know, why would I play Earl Scruggs, you know, a piece if Earl Scruggs playing right after us? Or why would I play something from Bela Fleck because he plays same day? Or why would Uwe play a Doc Watson thing? Doc Watson's playing here. So the only justification for us to be there is to play something that I play and nobody else is playing. Yeah, and it's still accessible. It's still usable.
So when Bill told you that, did that make you focus more on your own composing?
Well, at first not, because I didn't like it. You know, because I said, well, I'm 19, I want to play bluegrass. And he said, don't do it. It was barely enough for me. And then I said, why shouldn't I do it? And he said, well, you're not from Kentucky. You know, you're from somewhere else and you have other ideas.
Yeah.
And so you have to be very honest about it. And he was very stern about it. We talked for nights about that. Mm-hmm. And he said, you have to come up. I mean, you don't have to come up. You have to just play your music and play it clean. Mm-hmm. Play it powerful, play it with commitment, and don't judge yourself, you know, about liking it or not. You just have to do it, you know, and then people will do whatever with it, and it's a very different situation than when you're just say in a jam and you play a new song of some great banjo player and you learned it and then you put it into the jam and you play it well and you sort of reminds you of the recording and it's a great feeling that you sound a little bit like your hero and it's a beautiful feeling. But that's not a career, right? The career is somewhere else, and so that's why I always think amateurs have a wonderful life because they can be in that life
Right.
Right? And, so in my free time, I like to play bluegrass, and I get together with Bobby Hicks or, people, and we play bluegrass. And
you get to sound like Earl Scruggs.
And I get to do these things, and I love it. And I just, can sort of do a reenactment of things as good as I can, and I enjoy it. And Uwe and me, we play Doug Watson songs, and I get the clawhammer and do Frosty Morn and do all these things. But when I'm doing my job and doing my career, I have to concentrate on the things that I do. And it's a different, and now I'm quite comfortable with it,
And now a word from our sponsors, but we will be right back with the episode in just a few moments. The Picky Fingers podcast is thrilled to be sponsored by Peghead Nation, the top site for instructional video courses in banjo, guitar, mandolin, fiddle, dobro, upright bass, and ukulele. You're going to learn bluegrass, old time, and other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in all of roots music. Go to pegheadnation.com to see their great lineup of courses. Here are some of the choices just for banjo. Beginning Banjo and Bluegrass Banjo with Bill Evans, Clawhammer Banjo with Evie Layden, Wade Ward-style Banjo with Bruce Molsky, The Banjo According to Danny Barnes, and Contemporary Bluegrass Banjo with Wes Corbett. All of these courses include high-quality multi-angle video lessons, downloadable notation and tablature, play-along tracks, and plenty of tunes and songs to play. The best part is that just for being a Picky Fingers podcast listener, you are going to get your first month free. So head over to pegheadnation.com and use the promo code PickyFingers at checkout. That's pegheadnation.com and PickyFingers, all one word, all lowercase, at checkout. The Picky Fingers podcast is also sponsored by Elderly Instruments. I have been so lucky to have Elderly Instruments as my local family-owned music store for as long as I can remember. But they are more than just that. They are the world's most trusted source for new, used, and vintage fretted instruments, which means they're the first place you should check for any of your banjo, mandolin, guitar, ukulele needs, instructional materials, and all the accessories to go with it. And the other part is that Elderly is just as well known for their excellent customer service as for their amazing selection of products. So head over to elderly.com to see their full inventory, or give them a call to talk to one of their helpful and professional sales representatives. That's 517-372-7880. And last but not least, we have another family-owned business in Sullivan Banjos supporting the Picky Fingers Banjo podcast. A lot of you know that I have been playing my Sullivan Banjo for about 20 years now, and I'm here to tell you that it is sounding better than ever. Now, fortunately for you, Eric is still maintaining that high Sullivan quality, and he is ready, willing, and able to build you the banjo of your dreams, whether you just want a tried and true traditional design on up through your wildest custom dream banjo. Eric is here to build it for you. Head on over to sullivanbanjo.com, email sullivanbanjo@gmail.com, or just go the old-fashioned way. Call up Eric Sullivan at 502-365-5022. Get that legendary Sullivan tone with that added personal touch of being able to design your banjo with the person who's actually building it for you.
The Picky Fingers Banjo podcast is sponsored by Bluegrass Country Radio, America's oldest bluegrass, old time, and Americana station. Shows are curated by real DJs, not computer algorithms. From classic bluegrass and traditional country to the best current artists, you'll find it all streaming at bluegrasscountry.org and on the station's free smartphone apps. That's bluegrasscountry.org.
So speaking more from a banjo player's perspective, what were the things that you worked on that helped develop your style of playing?
Well, I would say the thing I worked on was developing taste in music. Let's say if I just play, and I have a 1, a 2, and a 1, a 3, and a 5.
Yep.
And now, do I always need them? Always? Can I do a chord like this? I do a chord like this, and if I only have 2 notes, Is it what I like? Is what I play actually what I want to hear, and not just something that I did because I heard it on a recording or that I'm able to do? Is it something that I actually want to hear?
Is that how you approach it? You figure out what you want to hear and then learn what that is in your head on the banjo?
Sometimes I noodle around, I get inspired, of what I hear.
Yeah.
But a lot of times better music comes out of me if I just imagine music and then try to learn it, which is sometimes easy because it's easier than I thought it would be. Yeah. And sometimes it's very hard.
It might be impossible, right?
Well, almost impossible, yeah. Sometimes I write things that I really like. And it's very difficult, So, and then I have to sit there and I have to work on it for a long time. And then I have other ideas where it goes... things like that. They are easier to play, but just more difficult to figure out because they have these complex chordal harmony structures that I hear that I want to achieve, and then I have to figure them out somehow. I have to find them. So what I do is I sit and I sing the next notes before I start playing.
You're teaching it to yourself, basically.
Yes, and that feels, in the end, these compositions always feel the best. The ones that I had in my mind, and then put them onto the instrument.
Yeah.
They're sometimes not the most fun, but they're the most satisfying over a long period of time.
Probably the best way to learn how to be yourself, like Bill wanted you to. That's a pure way of writing.
Yeah, he said to me, well, you can play pretty much anything you want right now, when I was 19. I could, I studied a lot of scales, and I studied... just studied, anything that you could sort of, do. And so I was very free, but I hadn't developed taste yet. I was able to play over chord changes in any, way, or play improvisation over Santa Ana's Reel or whatever, But to hear and have a taste about music, it was not very developed, to say that. Yeah. And, great composers, like Mendelssohn, they would have had an amazing taste already developed, which I hadn't developed yet. I was just able to do a lot of things.
How did you develop, or actually, let me back up. Hearing what you just said you could do at 19, I'm imagining you playing that in front of Bill Monroe, and he has a reputation of being very closed-minded and stubborn about how bluegrass should be. And I'm wondering why do you think he took to you? Because that seems like the kind of thing that he would not have liked in a lot of people. But maybe I just have it wrong. I never met him, but I'm going by his reputation.
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I tell you the truth, I don't know. He obviously, he liked it. He saw that I was able to do things and compose, and he wanted to encourage me. I think he really wanted to encourage me. He also said, go home, write a lot of music, come back to America.
Yeah.
Right?
That's amazing.
And so I did, So I went home. I studied a lot of music, I was always interested in classical music.
Yeah.
So I studied a lot of counterpoint. I studied, of course, a lot of jazz theory. I became also electric guitarist. And
oh, really?
That's actually how I met Joel. We did the jazz standard gigs.
Oh, okay.
And he didn't even know that I played banjo, So we played, in hotel lobbies, playing jazz, just standard, not just jazz fake book stuff.
Yeah.
And so I learned a lot, about modes and scales and, diminished and, locrians and super locrians and, everything that you want to know.
Have you put a lot of that on the banjo? Yeah, okay.
Whatever, it's really doesn't matter. Yeah. Let's say, I put everything that on the banjo, but it's not the music that I do. Of course I can go to a jazz session and play, but it's not the music I do, right? It's not what I do.
Sure. Another thing that you've told me about in the past, and this is quite a few years ago, I remember you explaining this technique that you have called floating, and it's maybe something that you and Ron Block did.
No, it's not what we did. Ron Block, he has this technique where he leaves the first and the fifth string open.
Okay.
At the time sometimes, and he does a lot of let's say you have these positions like, first finger on the first fret on the second string, and the third, the ring finger,
the B flat, right?
B flat here. And if you take this position, and then you go up to the 10th, and the 5th, 3rd, and you have passing notes like the 6th fret on the second string. So. It's like a modern type of bluegrass style, which sort of is because you're playing blues, in a sense, you're taking the first string and the 5th and just letting them ring because they always fit.
Yeah, yeah.
And then you just sort of put all these other notes in the middle, and sometimes you take the first string. That's okay.
Right.
I could do Blum Monroe stuff and licks,
Yeah, it's a way of exploring a lot of different color tones.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
So this floating in the middle of the banjo, just sort of up and down, and not really worrying too much about the chords. Really just playing sort of an expressive, avant-gardistic almost, blues style over it.
Mostly because that works because those open strings
sort of tie it together, yeah. They sort of tie it together.
Yeah, that's interesting.
It's a very interesting, so you wouldn't do an entire solo like that, but maybe the end of it or do something with it, it sounds very interesting.
Yeah, it's a thing to explore.
Yeah, so it's sort of, it's an airy sort of sound,
Another technique of yours that anybody who has seen you do is your vibrato technique.
Yes.
Why don't you either, I don't know, explain how you came up with that and how you decide to use it?
It came up, I came up with that because I played lots of Telecaster, in bands. So you need to mute constantly.
Yeah, to get a chicken picking kind of sound.
So you got to mute constantly.
Right.
And because you got to mute, I started doing that on the banjo, like on the guitar, you would in Chet Atkins style, where you...
that's like a right-hand palm mute.
Yeah, right. So, and then if I just mute and, play the strings and then let go, then the string doesn't have the first impulse.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So if I keep it muted, it just dies. But if I mute it and let go, I just eliminate the first impulse, but I have just a sustain of it.
Yeah.
Okay, so now if I then move the neck, I'll just show it without mute, just a little bit. That gives me sort of a little bit of a chorus.
Right.
Okay? So I can go, and then I can add.
Yeah, that's very cool. Sounds like an organ.
Yeah, it sounds
a Leslie speaker.
So I use that a lot. That's, for instance, like rhythm like that, and then Uwe plays solo. Maybe you go. And so it helps.
That's very cool.
It helps.
I really like that.
It helps to make a backup for the guitar to float on better.
Yeah, you're creating more. It seems like more sustain than it should have.
Yeah, because I'm creating more sustain because I eliminate the first impulse.
Yeah.
So I'm not playing quiet at all. I'm actually playing very loud. I'm just eliminating the top. So it's not like if I would play this without, it would be like that,
Yeah.
But,
you just keep your, and I guess I'm more describing it for the people listening who can't see you. You just keep your right hand on the strings just for that first moment to where the attack would be. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So let's talk about the band you have. A lot of these ideas and the original music you were writing, I imagine that a lot of that is what you are performing or have performed throughout the years with your band.
Yeah, so we, of course, we have a stock of songs that we just sort of doodle and have a lot of fun with, you know, and we throw them in once in a while, not to make the program too rigid, you know, even though they seem, but we arrange everything heavily. I mean, everything is very thought out.
Yes.
Even though if it's simple, it doesn't matter. It's always thought out. So when we jam or we just get another musician to play with us, it always destroys the arrangement, right? Mm-hmm. So it's good for certain songs to do that. Doesn't matter how good the musician is. He will not know our arrangement.
Yeah, he hasn't been to rehearsal.
Right? No, so it will always be an improvisation, which is fun and it can be really good, and I enjoy doing. But to create an entire program like that is not what I want. I would like to actually work out music really, really thoroughly. You know, I don't like to improvise too much. I like to actually work out the music.
That's very apparent watching the show that it's very orchestrated, even down to little rhythms.
I love that, and so I'd rather work with a string quartet, for instance, where I have everything written out, and so the notes come really where I wanted them, from everybody, including me. I'm also in a corset, you know. I'm not playing freely. I play. I'd rather focus on the expression of how I play it than the notes. I don't want to think about the notes anymore. It would be like somebody who plays Shakespeare. He doesn't think about the words.
The words don't change, right?
It's the same words,
right?
But it's the way he interprets them. And so I like to have the focus. I like to be freed from the burden of the notes. I like the notes to be good. Yeah. It's like a good text. And it takes a while to come up with a good text. I don't want to come up with the text on stage for my music. Mostly, I'm saying mostly. Sure. I like to really come up with a text that I want to say. And then how do I say it is where my focus is really going to be. Yeah. So on stage, I want to have every night have a little freedom of how am I going to say this text I really want to looking forward of saying.
Yes.
And so that gives me great pleasure, and it gives me also joy to do it almost every day. Mm-hmm. And because it releases me of this burden of trying to find what am I going to say tonight.
You've already put in that work to figure out what you're going to say.
This is the program. This is what I want to say. I want to say certain things, and then it's how am I going to say them tonight?
Yes.
It's a different challenge than maybe improvising every night, trying to find a new angle of improvisation, which I also like. And we have a few tunes where I do this, but the majority, let's say 90% of our show is the notes are where they need to be.
Is that part of the reason you've had a 3-piece band and you've lasted for quite a long time? Is that part of the reason that you need to have that consistent group in order to execute all these things?
Exactly. You know, of course, let's say I just finished a new big commission piece for symphony, and so for Joel to learn all this music is enormous work, you know, and I mean for everybody, but I can just print out the sheet music for Joel, right?
Yeah.
So Joel can play it from sheet music. Uwe doesn't read music. So we play, and I write him out a chart, maybe, you know, and he plays it with the chart, and he finds the way on the guitar, how it's best for him to approach it on the guitar. But then we work a long time. And actually, it's an interesting point. When I was young, I always thought all the music that I heard at Flat and Scruggs do and all this, it seemed so many notes, and I knew that they're playing without music, that I thought this is probably all improvised. Till I listened to a lot of shows, you know, when I was with Todd Taylor, he had, you know, dozens and dozens of live shows of Flat and Scruggs. Mm-hmm. And I realized, you know, every week he recorded them, you know, for months and months. And then I realized, they're playing exactly the same show. I mean, it's the same jokes. The solos only changed. The solos only changed if Earl Scruggs maybe with a little hiccup.
Yeah.
But the solos were mainly the same. The backups was mainly the same.
For all of the musicians?
All the musicians, you know. It was actually a very orchestrated music. It's like when you listen to Alison Krauss, I mean, there's not that much. I mean, there's always a little wiggle room for the dobro and some backup here and there. But basically, the music is extremely orchestrated.
Very consistent.
Very, very consistent. And that makes the quality so good because you realize, okay, last time I played this note a little earlier, and I think it's better if I play it even earlier or less, and you really get down to the nitty-gritty of one note.
Yeah, that's a very microscopic look at it.
You're not like, okay, let's try a complete different substitution, you know?
Right, yeah. Up the neck with this other roll or down the neck.
You know, you're just really thinking, am I going to, or I'm going to do, or, you know, you're thinking in these sort of parameters. And I once talked to Doug Watson about it, and he said to me, you know, Jens, it takes me a long time to come up with something that's worth playing for people.
Wow.
I like that.
He put in a lot of work, yeah.
And you see, no, all the things I'm saying here is not something that applies. I mean, it's not a general truth. I'm just saying, you know, it's a personal preference, you know.
That's what you like, yeah.
Yeah, you know, it has no, you say general truth. Music that's the nice thing about music. Everybody can do anything he wants to do, and if he likes it or he enjoys it, and people enjoy this, that's all right, you know. I mean, but but I've been playing for people professionally now. I had my first paying show in 1973.
Okay.
Right. So, and then I've been full time, you know, playing every day for my life. For 40 years. And of course, in that time, you think a lot about, you know, do I like my job? Right? Is this what I want? And I used to say, you know, we get paid for traveling. Playing's free.
Yeah, exactly.
But I also enjoyed traveling, actually, to be honest. You know, I love that. But the banjo itself, I don't want to make, want to sound advertisers or something, you know, but I
was going to ask you anyway, so yeah, go ahead.
To actually come up with my music, I needed a banjo with more sustain. You know, I have a few old Gibsons and I have a few, valuable instruments, and they're all not good for what I do, right? I could not have done what I do with this. You know, so this has.
Well, and tell everyone what this is.
Okay, this is a Deering banjo, and I've been working with the Deering Banjo Company for 12 years now.
Right.
I'm their director of research and development, so I design all their banjos.
You are?
Yes,
I did not know that.
Yes, so I'm working on the metallurgy. We're working with the woods, with the design of the tone from all the banjos.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, so...
But you do have specifically a signature model.
Yeah, which incorporates a lot of the things, you know, that I like about it. It's a stainless steel. It's a steel tailpiece, which gives me a lot more stability on the... it doesn't resonate, you see, there's no sound. A lot of tailpieces go do, 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 you know, do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And I like the tailpiece to not give. I like this... And it's really stable. There's no going on.
It's a very direct note,
yes,
and not as many overtones.
So, and then I use stainless steel frets because then I don't have to worry about them wearing down. So I can play the same setup for a long time.
Sure.
And they sound great. They're always polished. See what I do? They don't go...
Yeah, no scratchy.
So I can use them for years. And they don't ever change. Sound fantastic. And then I have a little bit of an arch in the fingerboard. Not as much as maybe Bella would have or other people. I just have as much as about a Martin guitar would have.
Okay.
Just because I played so much guitar.
So like a 14 or 16 inch, something like that.
Yeah. So.
And what do you think that adds? That's a big debate where...
It doesn't add anything, really. I mean, I would just play the same on the flat fingerboard. It wouldn't really matter that much. It was just from a time where I would switch between guitar and banjo. and I just have a similar radius.
Yeah,
and
that makes sense.
Feels more the same. But basically, it doesn't matter. Like in classical guitar, they're all flat.
Sure.
And Andrea Segovia, you wouldn't argue, or Paco de Lucia, you would not argue, that they would have been any better, with the arch stringer board.
Yeah, he does okay.
They all did okay, So that's not an argument, really. I don't think it's faster or anything. It's just, it was a transition from one instrument to another. That was a little bit, but even today, I wouldn't worry that much anymore, really.
The instruments that I've played of your signature models, they all tend to have a rather chunky neck. Do you think that adds to the sound as well?
No, well, actually, they used to be more chunky, and now they're not.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I use 11 strings. I use 11, 12, 13, which is considerably heavier than most people would use today. Even Ron Block, people like that would maybe use a 9 or 10.
Sure.
9.5 is a lot. But I get, when I play, I have more tone on one string.
Yeah, it's not as twangy. Yeah.
So it has more tone.
Yeah.
So, and then the head, I use it around G.
Oh, slightly lower than what a lot of people would.
Yes, it's a G.
Yeah. And what kind of head is it?
It's a Remo. So I went with Greg, I went to visit Remo Bella, and I told Remo Bella, years ago, I said, well, your banjo heads break because they're glued in, and the banjo head has a lot more tension than a snare.
A drum, right?
A drum, so because it's tighter. So it pulls it out, and the banjo heads, pull out of the glue. Maybe not all the way, but they're not even anymore.
Enough to ruin it,
and they just don't sound good. Some of them sound good because they don't pull out as easy as others. But if they start pulling out a little bit, well, you have an uneven head, and it really doesn't sound that good. And I said to him, they would sound, and even for the Deering Banjo Company, it was important. They would change put on the head, and they would have a certain percentage that would break by putting on. So I said, why don't you trim the head?
Okay.
And they had at the time, in Taiwan, they had a little plant where they would, trim heads. But the mylar wasn't from DuPont. It was a different kind of mylar. And it wasn't that good sounding. It was a different material and also different frosting. So I said, why don't you, crim it and with your material that you usually use? And so Remo said, okay, let's do it today. And so they changed the heads at that moment. So that's why these.
And when was that?
That was about 10 years ago.
So ever since then, the banjo heads that they make have incorporated that?
Well, actually, first they just started making it for Deering.
Okay.
And now all the Remos you see, they're trimmed because it's because I told them that they would, and they actually tune better. See the sound, and you can hear better sound. What happened a few years ago, they had to change the mylar because DuPont doesn't use the same mylar anymore.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it's actually a better mylar. It's just a little different to listen to at first. But these new Remo heads, they are absolutely phenomenal. You can,
it's just the regular frosted top ones that you get
tops,
anywhere. Yeah.
And they're just fantastic. I mean, you put them on and you just don't tie them too much. And so that's good. My bridge is about 2.3 grams. So
is that a Deering bridge?
Yes, yeah, it's a Deering bridge. And I came up with a design. It's called Smiley. Well, Greg came up with that name, but where the middle foot is actually taller than the side.
Right.
And so it actually, because a bridge would always sag after a while, because, it's wrong. The bridge has to have a little bit of a curve to give a little counter to the...
As much contact with the head on that underside.
So it doesn't have the stress just on the outer feet, also on the middle foot. And it helps the bridge to rock better because it stands in the middle. And it actually transfers sounds much better to the outside of the banjo head.
Yeah, how cool. Well, that's amazing. I saw Joel walk in. I wasn't sure if he was trying to.
No.
If he was trying to get. Another memory I have of you is that you looked at a tone ring. This is back at the guitar store, and you picked up a tone ring and you clocked it with something and you listened to it, and you said that you knew what it was made of just by hearing the decay of the notes. And I have no way of knowing whether you were right or not, but you seemed pretty confident with it. Where did you pick up the ability to do that kind of thing?
Well, I can't exactly tell, but I can pretty much tell. I can tell a lot of things. It's like somebody who drinks wine a lot. He can taste, this is a Merlot, and this is, Cabernet, and this is maybe, a Malbec or whatever. But, for me, it's, I worked so much with foundries, and I developed hundreds of prototypes of tone rings. And
working with Deering or?
Working with Deering through foundries with Deering, and myself before I even worked with Deering. Because I took some old, Gibson tone rings, and we had them analyzed. And we did analyzing, of these tone rings at the National Institute in Switzerland of material. And so they could even tell me how hot the copper was when they put the tin in.
Oh, wow.
I mean, because of what happens chemically, I mean, they could find any trace, and they analyzed it to me completely. And I did a few different rings and a few different things. So
how much variation? I'm just sorry to interrupt. How much variation, if you give them two old Gibson rings, how different would they be?
Well, that would be very difficult to answer because, maybe they have a batch that's very similar and then they have a batch that's not. I mean, for the ones we analyzed, there's quite a difference, but not as much as you would think. And actually, it's a very simple metal, and it's very crudely made. It's not a really high refined metal. It's what's called maritime bronze, red pouring. It's a regular industrial standard material. It's 5% zinc, 5% tin, 5%, 4% lead, so you can machine it better, and the rest is copper.
Interesting.
And so in some of them you have 3% lead or 5 or 6, and some of them have 7% tin, 7%, but it's basically all sold as the maritime red pouring, right? Okay. And so it's pretty much a very simple material. And they were not poured in individual sand casting. They were poured actually as a tube. The ones I had analyzed, they were tubal pourings, not individual sand casts. Sand cast was used for prototypes, but the production was a tube, and then they just saw the tube and drill it and take all the shavings and put it back into the pot.
Yeah.
And so that's why you have all these variations, because you never know what you put back in the pot, I mean, you just throw it in there.
It can change a little bit.
It's the 30s, forget it, I mean, it's just whatever. And there's not that much magic about a tone ring, actually, to be true. And, I have plenty of banjos that are old, they're really bad banjos, I mean, they're not good, just not very responsive. And basically, you can make any banjo sound good or bad. It has a lot to do with the player and of what he knows, and that, you have J.D. Crowe, he would never liked the banjo of Ralph Stanley, because it was arched up, or just the personal preferences of what you get used to and what you expect to hear when you play has a lot to do if you like the sound or not.
Yeah, definitely.
But what I needed was a sound that has enough sustain, that's clean, and so.
So when you're doing your design work for Deering, does most of what you design have that image of what you want in mind, to have a lot of sustain, or do you try to vary it?
I vary it a lot. For instance, the tone ring I have in my banjo is a little heavier, and Terry Bolcom model, for instance, is a lighter tone ring, and we have different, little different, aspects of things, because everybody's different. Everybody wants a little bit something different, But I tried, on your question again, I tried so many tone rings that we did tone rings completely out of copper. We did them out of, we did them completely out of, all kinds of materials. And we made tone rings with 2080 bronze. We made tone rings out of, 12% lead.
Yeah.
And we made them. So I've listened to so many tone rings, and I know how they react. And I have actually literally hundreds of tone rings at home. That we did as prototypes.
Just experimental ones.
And so I tried them all, recording in banjos, tabbing. I would argue I could tell you, if you bring me a tone ring, I could tell you pretty much what it's made out of and probably what's in it.
That's very cool.
Not all the ingredients, of course, but mainly just the bulk, what's in there. But I'm telling you, if the tone ring's not too hard, that's good. If it's too soft, that's not good either. Like just copper itself, sounds just too dead. It takes up too much vibrations away.
So copper or lead would make it too soft?
It just sort of starts sounding, it starts over-ringing in itself because there's a weird overtone dampening going on. And if the tone ring's really, really, really hard, it starts to sound a little tinny on the fingerpick end.
Okay.
So, but even a really good hard tone ring, could sound fantastic, and so does the soft one.
Yeah.
But I like something in between, that's not too harsh on the fingerpick. You can
Best
sense
of both worlds, yeah.
That's not too harsh, and yeah. But these days, with the Kruger Brothers, I compose a lot of music.
Yeah.
I write almost every day something. I come up with some idea. And then, so writing for string quartet was very important for me in the last years. Writing all these commission works for Chamber Music America and National Endowment of the Arts, and doing all these commission works,
Are you self-taught in terms of that? Have you studied classical composition in some way, or are you?
Not formally, but of course I started 40 years ago by buying books, or borrowing books and talking to composers, talking to arrangers, and so learning about the instruments, learning about the staff writing, learning about all that, and of course counterpoint and harmony structure, and so I learned a lot. Just finished a piece for Union Pacific, in the town of Ogden, a big symphonic piece.
Okay.
And it cannot be too experimental because it's an American piece, right? It's a patriotic American piece. So I want it to be grand and clean, clear,
yes,
large, and Sousa-esque.
Sousa, exactly. Yeah.
some parts of it, and of course, also questionable. Very, very, like. And stuff like that, more intricate things, and then of course, but to write music that it sounds right, in an orchestra, to set the instrument, you have to know the instrument orchestra, and you have to learn a little bit, to make it the sound,
Yeah. It's more than just, I want this note. They can, the violin will play that one.
Let's say you're making a tutti, an entire chord of an orchestra.
Yeah.
Runs, There's so many different approaches, Let's say if you take, some American composers, you would see like Hans Zimmer, he would, let's say, he would use a lot of ones and fives.
Okay.
Not a lot of thirds, right?
Yeah.
In a tutti chord. Maybe 1/3 in an oboe or somewhere, in a flute.
Mostly just a power chord. Yeah.
Just a power chord 1 and 5. But when you look at Beethoven, for instance, starting the Sixth Symphony, right, you would hear just ones and about 3 different threes, but not a single 5.
Ah, interesting.
Right? So there's a different approach of how the sound actually is achieved. You wouldn't just have a whole bunch of 3s and a whole bunch of 5s. And the 3s are very difficult. If you have a third, very low in the orchestra, for instance, a third has a 5th that rings as an overtone.
Yeah.
Right, and that doesn't.
It can confuse the sound of it,
and that will clash with the 1.
Right.
Right. So that would be difficult, like if you have the third of a G is a B, and the fifth, and the 5th is an F sharp. Now you're going to have that, or the third, that's going to hurt. It's going to be a D flat or a D sharp. So you're going to hear that in the sound, and so you have to be really careful where you use them, and like say things that sound good at home maybe don't sound good at the orchestra.
Yeah.
So you want to know how this all works, and then you are more freely to work,
Yeah, and I imagine you're improving with each one as you hear how it turns out. You might learn some things to do for next time.
Absolutely, and I love that process. And then so this is two worlds that I do. I compose a lot. Mm-hmm. I just did 6 weeks of straight composing every day. And now I'm on the road playing, and I'm really happy to do that.
Is this the easy part?
I don't know. It's challenging in a different way, but I love it.
Yeah.
And tonight is this beautiful little place here, and it's gorgeous.
Well, we love it too. It's great. I love your music, and really respect what you do. Seems like you can do just about anything.
No, that wouldn't be true. But there's people that I really admire, like Ryan Cavanaugh. He's an amazing, he can just play about anything, or Noam Pikelny. When you look at these people, I'm so happy that they are here and they play out there, because they make my life so much easier, because they give the world such great banjo music that they expect great things of a banjo, and that makes it beautiful, for me to work.
Gives it more respect, you mean?
Well,
for people?
Yes, I think the banjo is looked at as an instrument that is a really cool, great instrument.
Yeah.
Because great and cool people play it out there. Like Noam and all these people. They're fantastic human beings. They do great things, and I can be part of that world. I'm very happy, thankful for that. Yeah.
Well, I know a lot of them look up to you too. How do people find your music on the internet if they want to come see you?
Our website is the easiest, krugerbrothers.com, and you can go and you can order the CDs there, or download it from there, or go to Amazon, or, find us. We also have an academy where I teach, every year.
Which academy is that?
It's our own. It's the Kruger Brothers Music Academy.
I'm not sure if I knew about that.
Yeah, it's 5 years old, or 6 years old now. And we're doing it in Wilkesboro. Mm-hmm. It's always the weekend after Morrowfest. And I get to talk about musical concepts.
So that's just in a few weeks here.
Yes, I'm really looking forward. It's a lot of fun. Yeah. And we have a great setting, and it's for all levels. And I get to talk about musical concepts that I find to be very important in music that I couldn't find in any books. So I can talk about how to improvise and think differently about the banjo.
That'd be incredible.
That's great. a lot of fun. So I have every level, pretty much from beginners to professionals coming. And
are you the only banjo instructor for that?
Actually, I am.
Okay.
And so I can get to really talk, meat and potatoes.
Yeah. That'd be incredible. I wish we had time to discuss all of those, get all of your secrets, but then it would ruin your camp.
No, not at all. I'll be glad to talk to you anytime you like to.
Oh man, that's great. Okay, Jens. Well, I got to get you to
That's all right.
to sound check. Your band is hovering.
That's all right.
Giving me dirty looks over there.
That's all right.
Cool. All right. Well, hey, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Keith.
I have tickets for tonight, so I'm looking forward to that, and I'll be seeing you for that.
I hope I get to hear you too.
Anytime. I got my picks. I didn't bring my instrument though, so
you can try mine.
Okay.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, folks. That's going to wrap up this episode of the Picky Fingers Banjo Podcast. The sound clips you heard were Cork Harbor by Jens Kruger, Molly and Tenbrooks by Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys, Blue Skies by Pete Seeger, Sarah by the Kruger Brothers, and then E Pluribus Unum by the Kruger Brothers. Special thanks once again to Paul Healy. He is today's VIP supporter of the show. If you like what you heard, please become a supporter yourself over at patreon.com/banjopodcast or contact the show, pickyfingersbanjopodcast@gmail.com. That's going to do it for me. I hope to see some of you either at Great Lakes Music Camp in early October or the Ashokan Banjo Weekend in mid-November. All right, folks, I'll see you next time.